Welcome to Living Once Twice, a lifestyle design and personal adventure podcast. My name is Justin. Come with me as I'm here to help you chart your course for creating the fulfilling life you desire. Join me as every Wednesday we'll dive into the inspiring guest stories, remarkable science, and useful strategies to help you create the momentum you need to take action towards designing your dream life. Remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Greetings, y'all. Welcome back to Living Once Twice. I am beyond grateful for your support and presence in tuning in. As I'm back, we are back creating and cultivating more content and more conversations, helping you to rewrite your own narratives, reinvent yourselves, and reimagine your lives. So for today, my question to you is this. Do you ever fantasize about quitting your job because you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or just frustrated? Or do you ever feel so burnt out inside that you think to yourself, man, these 3-day weekends or these 1-week vacations, they just aren't enough. And I really could use a break from the work grind. But you're worried that taking any type of break or stepping away would derail your life and your career. Then today's episode, I'm telling you, it is for you, as I'm going to share more about my own personal struggles with burnout and how an unexpected career sabbatical both rescued my health and my career. Before I dive in, I just want to remind you, if you're enjoying the show, I'd be grateful for your support by sharing the Living Once Twice podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, or wherever, and leaving us a review on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Also be sure to follow us on Instagram at Living Once Twice for more content updates. So let's talk about, I think, a very commonly talked about word and experience for so many folks out there, which is job burnout, which I'll define as that prolonged work-related stress that results in a state of physical or emotional exhaustion or cynicism about work. And if that definition resonates with you, say I. Clearly it does, because I'm going to talk about my own experience with it. But we all know, like, work stress, it's just a common part of the territory, right? That comes with it. But what about when you can't bounce back from that stress? Or it starts to involve a reduced feeling and sense of accomplishment and even loss of your personal identity, or you even frequently have negative thoughts and feelings about your work. That's what I'm talking about today. And what I hope to offer for those of you that felt that definition and the earlier mentions of thinking about quitting your job because you constantly feel stressed and overwhelmed and depleted, or you feel so emotionally and physically spent that a few days off just isn't refilling your cup. What I hope to offer is some insights from, again, my own journey with this, and give you some insights on how you can not only recover from it, but more importantly, keep your battery, keep your soul recharged if you ever find yourself in that state again. And I want to call burnout a state, literally and figuratively, because I think it's sometimes a place that we don't have to travel to, but other times in life, especially with work life, work just puts you in kind of like a quote unquote layover there. But again, I don't think we have to be stuck or stranded there for too long. So I'm going to offer you with some tools, some insights there on how to just manage yourself if you find yourself there. So to bring this kind of to the surface, this episode is also very timely and intentional because exactly a year ago, I entered in what I would call a sabbatical season from work. We often hear about sabbaticals because, say, in the education world, faculty are taking time away from teaching to go work on a research or a book, etc. But in my case, this sabbatical or personal leave, it stemmed from burnout. And I talked back in season 1 about my career outside of podcasting and coaching, which is higher education. I mean, this has been my as I call it, my sport the last 14 years. It's another form for me to really, inspire people to maximize their development and rewrite narratives, reinvent themselves, reimagine their lives by taking advantage of the opportunities an educational experience like college can open up and provide. But last year, I hit a wall that I couldn't get through. And to give you some context here, so back in May of 2021, I was beginning to take on some new responsibilities that expanded the scope of my role, my overall plate, which was exciting and a blessing. But of course, the golden question, I think in my mind, and I think in anyone's mind, is always whenever new responsibilities and new work comes your way, it's like, y'all gonna pay me for this, right? Which was communicated to me, yes. And I knew that the process that I had been shared with was like on the HR side, in order to be compensated for that work, I was going to have to go through what's called a reclassification process, where they look at your job description of what you're currently doing. They look at your new responsibilities, and then they do a review to determine like how you newly should be classified and compensated at. Sounds straightforward, but it wasn't like a timely process. And it was something in which like you have to kind of be in the role working for a period of time. And so like, it wasn't like a 1 month or a 6 week thing. I mean, it was for this process, it was getting to the point of, it was coming up until like a year in which this reclassification process, it wasn't finalized. No determination was made. And, so I'm still working at, my same title, pretty much same salary. And deep down, I was fearing something that was shared with me, which was this could go on. And it could get to the point where HR could come back and say no, right? And if they did that, then we'd have to like go through a resubmission of it or try a different path. So what happened, again, this was May 2021. So we're talking, it was around May 2022, made it a year. But what happened was that on Wednesday, June 28th, 2022, and I'll never forget that date, I got the word that HR did their review and they didn't approve the reclassification, what we had gone for. And that broke my spirit, even though, again, a little part of me was kind of preparing for that news, but it still broke my spirit. And it was even shared with me that, we could use the feedback from HR to resubmit this reclassification again under just like a different title, or we could just try a different path. But in my mind, I was just deflated, and I couldn't bear going through that process again, especially because it took so long, and it was just kind of waiting, and it wore on me. And which brings me to the point of talking about burnout here, because again, with these new responsibilities, it was a grind. And in my mind, I remember telling myself like, okay, and this is with it before I found out the decision. It was like, I'm going to give everything I got in this new role, in these new responsibilities, because I got to prove myself to ensure that there's no way nobody can deny this reclassification. And that was my mentality over that year. But it was costing me. It was costing me because I lost a sense of myself. I was trying to prove my worthiness based on production, based on output, based on appeasing a process, based on ensuring that no person could deny my value. And as this season is all about overcoming self-sabotage, that self-sabotaging mentality conflicted with my spirit inside, because I knew my value. My spirit knew my value. My spirit knew my worth. My spirit knew that my feelings of frustration and exhaustion and unhappiness with the process was valid. And my spirit knew that I didn't need this process to validate that. But I wasn't listening. My ego wasn't listening. So that led me to finding myself emotionally drained after, say, a 3-day weekend. As soon as we get back, have the first virtual meeting, and I was zapped. or my mind was just not able to be at peace or even focus because things just didn't feel right. Things just didn't feel just. And I'm trying to suppress it all though, because again, my ego, my belief system is that I've got to prove myself to get this validation that I deserve. And I admit within that year, I not only lost my sense of self, I also questioned my own competence, my own abilities, because I couldn't understand, like, why was this taking so long? Like, why did I have to even prove myself here? So, going back to that Wednesday, June 28th, when I got that news, again, it took the wind out of my sails because it didn't get approved. And I knew I could go through that resubmission process and based on that feedback shared by HR, but I was spent emotionally, physically. I knew deep down, if I kept going, my mind and body were truly going to give out. And I read way too many stories of people who that's exactly what happened. Their bodies and their minds gave out on them. And so what happened was essentially, I think the next day I had a conversation with leadership to share that I would wrap things up that summer and I would resign. And to be honest, this wasn't no chess move because I knew even if things got turned around quicker, sooner, I was operating beyond empty. There was nothing left in my tank to give others. So looking back at it now, me saying that I would, wrap things up and resign was like kind of my own kind of cry for help that I needed to step away from the working world completely and to get my head on straight because I'm not me. I know myself. I'm a glass 3/4 full person. This is a blessing. It's a blessing to be alive every day. And I was struggling and I needed a breather. And I needed that breather to get, like I said, get my head on straight. And so in a really divine turn of events, leadership really validated everything I was sharing and offered me the opportunity to instead resign to go on 8 weeks leave while they worked on the resubmission, which I wasn't expecting at all. And I was honestly prepared. I wasn't prepared for that to be an option. I really thought I thought that was it. And so, but that option would give me the space to clear my head, to recharge and still have this opportunity to return and see how the process would play out. And so even though it would be unpaid, that felt like a great option. So from September to November, I was essentially on leave or what it's called sabbatical. And I just want to share a few insights as it relates to my recovery from that burnout experience, from those self-sabotaging, that workplace mindset, and ways for you to keep yourself afloat if you find your own self slipping into, again, that state, that burnt out state, so you can avoid getting this deep into that rabbit hole of burnout. So the 3 reflections that I want to share with you that really came to me during that time period off. The first reflection I had was I had to admit I was the causer. I had to take responsibility in the fact that I didn't set healthy boundaries and limits. As much as I wanted to play the blame game and point the finger and relinquish accountability and responsibility, I had to admit, again, I could have done more in my power to ensure that things did not get to the point that it did. I could have had the hard conversation sooner, more frequently about the process, compensation, workload, the impact that it was having on me, but I didn't. I gave into fears that, damn, if I say something, this is going to impact me, and I don't want to jeopardize this process anyways, right? So let me stay quiet. Let me essentially, dim my own voice. And I think for many of us, that fear and that belief, it's real. It's valid for many reasons. We live in this culture, in this society that due to kind colonization and Western thinking and white supremacy, it doesn't feel safe to express yourself. It doesn't feel safe to express a boundary and a limit in the workplace because you're not sure if retaliation or some other type of action is going to be taken against you. So I completely understand it. But I think in my case, and I think the case of so many of us, we give away and we relinquish our power when we remain as silence or we play the blame game towards our bosses in the system. We have to take accountability and responsibility over our own lives, over our own careers, and really tackle the real problems and issues within us when things get tough. Because as I also discovered, like leaving isn't always the answer, especially when it gets hard in the workplace and relationship. And for me, I was so quick to feel like that was the answer. And so, yes, it was tough going through the situation. It's tough to come to the realization that, yeah, I'm not exempt from any of this responsibility because I didn't set boundaries and limits. But as I mentioned, my spirit knew things didn't feel right. Things didn't feel just. But instead of having that difficult conversation, I said, I'll be silent. I'll even work harder, or I'll walk away versus seeing how this can be fixed. And again, this doesn't mean that people or things that happen to us aren't fair or right. Or if you're in a situation that is really toxic that you need to get out of it. But I think failing to just establish and communicate boundaries and limits from, in this case, in myself sooner could have saved me so much inner wear and tear that I was experiencing. And it could have opened up solutions sooner because, as I mentioned, once I hit my breaking point and then did communicate honestly, the response was so much more receptive and collaborative than I imagined. And I think many of us can find that if we do open up and share our truth, that the receiver on the other side maybe had no idea what was going on and would like to meet us halfway. And again, the ball is in the court. If that person, that system, that whatever doesn't want to, then you have your answer on how you need to move. But as Andrea Owen shares in her book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, when it comes to this, you have to ask yourself, if you find yourself feeling angry or frustrated at work, what are the needs? What are the values that are in conflict that have to be explored? And ask yourself, have they been expressed? Like, what are the boundaries and the limits that you need to set that will get you closer to your reality, that ideal workplace environment, that ideal state in your relationship? And then ask yourself, well, what's preventing you from even taking action and expressing those boundaries and setting those limits? Is it your mindset? Is it fear? Is it resources? You don't feel you've got the tools to have the conversation, the words, which I'll kind of talk about in a little bit. Or is it just commitment? Is it your own follow through? And then the final question I would ask to you too, if you find yourself frustrated or angry, but then maybe afraid to communicate or set that boundary, set that limit, what's going to happen if you don't? What's going to happen if you don't have that hard conversation? What's going to happen if you don't set that boundary or limit? And again, I think in a case of burnout, something's going to give. And it could be your health. It could be your physical, mental health, your emotional health. And that's something that you can't compromise. And the final point that I want to say about this whole aspect of boundaries and limits is, as someone who suffers from that self-sabotaging mindset of perfectionism and of people-pleasing, one of the other discoveries through this was like, sometimes a B is great. Sometimes that's the limit you need to set for yourself. We don't always, and we honestly can't always realistically give an A++ effort. A 70 is still passing. And albeit in this context, so many of us out there, think about this, in grade school, even in college, we didn't get, not everyone out here listening, I'm sure, got a 4.0 or 100 overall GPA, but I bet things in your life have turned out okay, right? So why can't we think about that in the context of the standard of our jobs at times, within reason? Because I don't want someone who's a doctor or a dentist to be giving me a C effort, a C+ effort, right? But within reason, there are going to be things in which you can give a B2, a passing grade 2, and that is okay. And so you really got to look at things and ask yourself, where are you overexerting yourself. Maybe that means you don't chime in on every email. Maybe it means you don't answer every email past a certain time. You stop working on the weekends. You stop trying to put out every fire because there's capable folks around you that can jump in. Maybe it's you don't take part in every single meeting or taking on the responsibilities of others at your job. Maybe you don't sign up and volunteer for every event. The list can go on, but thinking about ways that you can minimize overextending or exerting yourself is one of the ways in which you can give yourself the grace and the space to really apply your energy to the things that matter and not spread yourself as thin, as I'll stress in another point. Which brings me to the second reflection that I had during the sabbatical season, which is that I want to offer is that the feeling of understanding that you are more than your title. I know this might seem like a no-brainer, but it's a powerful reminder that we spend more than 1/3 of our lives working. And in our society, it's very, very easy to tie our true identity and our worth to these outside roles. So when that promotion doesn't work out, or that job lets you go, or in other contexts, to say that relationship doesn't go as planned, that friendship ends, that business doesn't work out, it's quite easy to think, what does this mean about me? Or to associate failure and hardship as a reflection of your abilities and your potentials. Well, that's not always accurate, or it just needs to be fully examined. And like I told y'all, it's no wonder the news hurt so bad when this was going on for a year, because I thought to myself, like, what am I doing wrong that this recognition or this compensation isn't coming? And does this mean I'm not competent in what I do? Does this mean that I'm a fraud? I even got to the point where I was like, am I weak for even considering quitting? That was even a thought in my mind of like, am I giving up too easy? Am I weak? Do I need to like push through? Am I not strong enough for this? This is why, and you hear me say this often, this is why that journey of self-love, trusting yourself, having faith in yourself is so important, because you are so much more than any of your worldly titles. And I mean all of them: employee, supervisor, content creator, coach. Heck, you're more than just a parent. You're more than just a sibling. You're more than just a partner. You're more than just a friend. You are a spiritual being, powerful beyond measure, and any box that a title could put you in. And depending on your spiritual walk, that definition may expand to your God, your higher power, as it does for me. And once I began to start seeing that and owning that there's more within me than this working title, it became really liberating to have less fear in terms of the outcome, because I knew that no matter what ended up happening, I will be okay. I will figure this out because I trust myself and I have faith in myself to figure that out and to navigate that. Which brings me to the third and final reflection that I want to offer that really builds upon this, which is you have to work harder on yourself than you do your job. Going back to my point that 1/3 of our lives is spent at work or working, that's a lot of eggs to have in one basket. And for many of us, we have to work. We have to work to live. We have to work to take care of the real world responsibilities. And for some of you, that's supporting more than just yourself. You got a family. You've got to keep a roof over their head. You've got to take care of their health, etc. But we live in an age where you could change your life at your fingertips. You have access to things, information, opportunities that can reimagine the trajectory of your life and your experiences. So with the limited time that we all have, I urge you to not live for the weekends if you truly don't have to, because that was one of the mentalities I know was coming out of my mouth often. And that toxic, and I think it's a very self-sabotaging mentality that so many of us have, where we live for the weekends. But you don't have to. During that year, even during my sabbatical, a part of working harder on myself was waking up early in the morning and working on building this virtual coaching practice, which I was able to launch while all this was going on, because that was a vision in my spirit. And also gave me some confidence too, like, well, if things don't work out, I have another way to service the world. I also started writing again and was able to work on an article about first-time managers and self-care and launch the YouTube channel. I just tried to pour into other areas that nurtured my soul in a way that work at that time wasn't. So think to yourself, like, how are you spending your free time? Even if you take a 1-hour time block twice a week, dedicated to you, I promise that habit of pouring back into yourself, it's going to stack up. And the consistent investment, it's going to bear fruits in whichever area you want to apply that to: health, finances, love, creative projects, your own self-improvement. So are you getting out for that walk or working out the gym? Would that contribute to your area of wellness? Pour into that. Are you making time to join that class or find that group program that aligns with your creative pursuits? Are you even taking a moment to be still and journal, which would bring you some peace, say before the email start or before your family wakes up? Again, you got to be mindful about the eggs you are just putting in your career basket, because you are the one investment that you can't avoid to skim on. The hustle and the bustle, it's always going to be there, y'all. But how many more sunrises and sunsets can we enjoy? How many more slow starts to the morning do we have? So what are those things that can't be compromised? So again, if you find yourself fantasizing about quitting your day job because you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, frustrated, or you just feel so burnt out inside that you're like, you know what? Forget these 3-day vacations, this 1-week vacations. I really need a break from the work grind. Understand there's so many different things that you could do. As I understand that, yeah, everyone's situation is different, and you may not be able to take an 8-week sense of leave or leave of absence from your work, but you may be able to do other things. And so I want to leave you with, again, some additional strategies and insights of what you can consider doing if any of this is resonating with you and you're feeling that you're getting to a state of burnout that you need to work on and work through and really heal and recover from. So the first thing I want to offer to you on what you can do, or what you should do if you start to feel like this sense of burnout is going on, is first and foremost, unplug so you can really get clear on what you want and what's not working. So this might mean taking the weekend, taking a vacation day to really define what's working well, what's not working, what's the boundaries and limits you'd like to see, and just explore where is the tension at. And as you start to sit with that and get clear and really be honest with yourself of what you want and what you need, it's the first step in you starting to reclaim your power back. And maybe a part of that unplugging is talking with someone you trust. And it could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be a coach, someone who could just be an outlet to help you to clarify your thoughts, even to start thinking through a plan or an approach so that you're just not stuck in your own head. Because sometimes too, when you talk to someone, just that validation, that feeling of validation that you're not crazy, you're not alone, can make all the difference. So after you really started to get clear on what you want, what's not working, and you honestly have kind of come to the conclusion that, yeah, I need change. I need change here. I encourage you to talk with your manager or talk with HR, because now that you've had this time to process and you're coming to it now from a state of clarity and not an emotional perspective, depending on your situation, your environment, I encourage you to talk with your manager, talk with HR, because burnout isn't a new thing. And as you may find yourself surprised to feel that, as I learned, your leadership really is able to sympathize and empathize with what's going on and will work with you on a solution. Now, if you're kind of wondering, okay, I do feel comfortable talking with my supervisor or going to even HR to have this conversation, but how do I go about doing it? I want to offer you some starting point from career coach Ashley Stahl, who says, hey, you could start the conversation like this, saying in your next chat with your supervisor, whenever you're ready to have that conversation, of saying, hey, so-and-so, I want to bring up something with you that feels vulnerable to admit, but my hope is that you could help me to come to some solutions that will make me perform even better for the organization. I've been feeling a more severe sense of burnout, and I want to see what my options were to refresh my mind so I can keep contributing to the best of my ability. Boom. Here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And from there, that allows for this co-created conversation to happen where you can start to explore and talk about, are there some things that can be improved upon, some things that could be made better? Are there some processes that could be rethought? It really opens up that floor for, again, a really transparent conversation to see, like, hey, can we collaborate together on overcoming this? Because sometimes, again, the solution isn't to leave, but it could actually be worked upon through changing some of the different tweaks of your role. Or it might be come to the conclusion that, some extended time off would be valuable to you. Now, I want to go back because I understand that everyone's situation, everyone's environment is different. So if you are in a toxic work environment, and then perhaps you have to go through a different channel, because even while it would be uncomfortable for you to have, you really have to think about, I get it, whether it's not talking to your supervisor, but going to HR. But I encourage you that even though having this honest conversation may be scary, that fear and that anxiety caused by that fear of a conversation like this, it's also normal. And at the end of the day, your needs, your overall health, well-being, and happiness far outweighs that fear. And if the organization really cares about you and values you beyond your production, and then it's going to show, whether it's the acknowledgement of like your workload, the talk and the conversation about support, about compensation, just the acknowledgement of the situation, even the transparency for them to share their own struggles, all of that, again, is really going to help you to understand, like, oh, okay, this is a place that I want to continue to work, and this is an issue that I want to work together to resolve. Or it might be a sign that, hey, you need to make another decision and start to plan, for example, maybe your pivot out. In my case, as I mentioned to you, the 8 weeks of unpaid leave was something that we discussed, and it really was something that I didn't think would even be an option on the table, but it really allowed me that space to recover and to get my head back on straight as things were getting worked out. Now, if you do find yourself in this conversation, you don't feel like that is receptive, that opportunity to co-create a solution that is really going to be ideal for you, then you have to decide, what's your threshold? Like, how much longer are you willing to stay in that situation? And I know sometimes that decision can involve, and those choices that you decide to make can involve money. And part of that might be starting to like save if a pivot has to be a part of your plan. And I know, like, for everyone, stepping away, quitting without something lined up, it's not everyone's reality. And so with that said, again, you have to get clear on what you want. You have to get clear on your limits, and then be prepared in the case that is not the outcome. And I knew for myself, I had to have this conversation about, well, if this doesn't work out, what would I do? What would be my backup? If it didn't work out, what would I need to survive for 3 months, 6 months until I could find something? Like, what would I do? I had to do what Tim Ferriss calls fear set, thinking about, okay, what's the worst fear that I have? Whether it's losing the job, not having health insurance, not being able to afford a roof over my head. What would I need to do? What would I need to change? How would I bounce back? How would I have to change my lifestyle? Like, these are all the things that, even for myself, that I had to consider when it really came to having this conversation. The last thing I want to kind of offer to you, if you're finding yourself going through this season of burnout and trying to work through it is you do have to take care of yourself. You do have to take care of your health and wellness. And there's a variety of different ways that you could do that, whether it's through talking to a friend, talking to a therapist, really investing in yourself health wise, going outdoors, working out, using your vacation time. The line that I want to really emphasize to you is this. As you navigate this, if you don't prioritize your health and wellness, no one is going to do it for you. The most well-meaning workplace, team, supervisor, they can't be expected to do that for you. And oftentimes, those blows to our health and wellness, those are the very challenging ones to recover from. Finances, career setbacks, they might be scary and difficult, but we could all hustle. We could all get creative. We could work back to climb out of those values. And oftentimes financial and career setbacks are just a part of life. However, your physical health, your mental health, your emotional wellness, you can't compromise that. And to be honest, the road to recovery from any damage in those areas can be a lot more significant and long to bounce back from. So if you are going through a season of burnout and navigating that, ask yourself, what are 2 to 3 things that you could do daily or weekly to sustain yourself as you're going through that process? I knew for me, it was working on creative work, going on walks, reading, really tapping into prayer. All of that gave me the energy. It gave me the light as I went through processing this. So to kind of bring things full circle as we get ready to close out this episode, I want to share how things played out, because about midway through this 8-week leave, and interesting enough, on my birthday, something divine happened. And I had to check in with my boss, who shared with me that everything with HR had worked out and everything went through, which without question was very delightful to hear, because that space away gave me again an opportunity to recharge, get my head back on straight. But it was also like a rediscovery that, I do enjoy what I do, and there's still positive impact for me to make in my role. And I want to continue to do that. And I feel very, very grateful that this situation happened, and it forced me to have this conversation, because, the outcome ended up being positive and working itself out, and really helping me to develop some new tools and some new strategies about navigating that state of burnout if I ever feel like it's arising again. And like I mentioned earlier in the beginning, I think it's a state that we all visit, but we don't have to stay there. We don't have to stay in that layover at all. So as I get ready to wrap this episode up, just remembering that it all starts with you, that burnout, it might not mean that you have to leave, but that things need to be explored, examined, and likely changed, because you might have a good situation and that could be hard to come by. And while you're in a hard situation now where you feel cynical about your work, you feel physically exhausted and burnt out, and you're even questioning yourself, that could all be fixed. You could have the hard conversations starting with yourself. You could have the hard conversations with your hopefully with your supervisor, with HR, and really getting the support from your support system. And hopefully through those means, you can discover whether it's extended time off, reworking your responsibilities, or resetting of boundaries and limits, or just prioritizing other areas of your life, personal care. And worst case scenario, maybe you discover it's a complete career pivot, or just a combination of all the above. But I think through some of these steps that I outlined, you can find what's the right combination for you to navigate if you find yourself in a season of experiencing burnout. So with that said, that's it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all again for your presence and tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please show your support by sharing the Living Once Twice podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, or wherever, leaving us a review on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Living Once Twice for more content updates, reaching out to you all through the time and through the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.